All right. Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
So today we're going to talk about mitochondria. Mitochondria have gotten super popular, or at least are trending up in mainstream health, which is exciting. But when people talk about mitochondria, we're going several levels deep with it. So what we have, and the reason I brought my little Russian doll, is because the story of mitochondria is a fractal story. So if you have you, then you have your cell, then you have mitochondria. So if you understand that process, that is the key takeaway of this, to understand what mitochondria are, at least where they are. So you're talking about subcellular because they're inside the cell. So we're going deeper, not around. So when people tend to talk about the brain and the heart, they don't know it, but they're really talking about mitochondria. Because the brain and the heart contain the most mitochondria in the body. Mitochondria are often referred to as the engines of the cell, because within those, they power the cell. We've got some rain here, so that's yeah, we've got a metal roof here. So basically, when you go down, what powers the cell is the mitochondria. That's a good explanation of what mitochondria are and what they do, but to really understand what goes on inside the mitochondria is the real key, because in my mind, this is the key to overall health. So I'm actually going to talk more about what goes on inside the mitochondria than what goes on outside the mitochondria. The end result of mitochondrial function is called ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. That's chemical energy, which is what most people focus on, and that's where chemistry ends, or starts, I'm sorry. So you've got the cell deals in chemicals, you deal in chemicals, but those things are all powered and created by mitochondria. So this is where chemistry stops. So if you have an illness that's chemical, you can treat it with a chemical, and if it goes this deep until you get here. If it's an illness that involves what I call charge, which is what takes place inside the mitochondria, chemistry will not help you, which is why it's so important to talk about mitochondria in terms of what they actually do. This morning I posted a blog about mitochondria called Mitochondria Light Converters, because that's what these mitochondria actually do inside the cells. So inside the mitochondria you have what's called electron chain transfer. This process is the process where electrons, which are subatomic particles, which are basically little suns. So the sun in the sky is a big electron, essentially. It is a electromagnetic ball that expresses frequency. We call it sunlight. So the sun has a magnetosphere, it has electric expressed within that magnetosphere, and then the combination of those two create a frequency that goes out of it called sunlight. Big sun. Little sun, the electron, is a little electromagnetic ball that has a magnetic field with electric expressed within it that expresses sunlight, called quanta. That's where we get quantum physics. So we're already in subatomic particles. But the important point is that these little suns, I only tell you that so now when I say an electron, you can visualize it. It looks like a sun emitting sunlight. Sunlight is frequency, frequency is information. So this process is these little suns called electrons express light, and that light then goes through a chain of events, which is why we call it electron chain transfer. The chain of events that it does is where it takes that light and those suns, and based on their complexity and their density, basically, convert into elements and then chemistry. So within mitochondria, they're light converters because it's where light, being electrons, because electric always looks like light, so you'll never find light that's not electric at its root. So you have this conversion of light into matter, basically. Various types of matter. The outcome of mitochondria is chemical energy, but inside mitochondria, during that chain of events where that light takes to make itself more complex, we get water. So this is a fantastic aspect of the function of mitochondria, is water creation. Most people don't know that they create water inside their mitochondria. The water acts as a battery. It conducts the electric within the magnetic field. So that water is a conductive medium for charge in the mitochondria that power the cell. So your body's electromagnetics are dictated by this process happening inside your mitochondria that then goes on to power your chemistry and your cells. So that's why brains and hearts are very, very electromagnetic, because they contain lots of mitochondria. Those mitochondria deal in electromagnetics. So the electron is a little EMF device, meaning a little electromagnetic frequency unit that goes through a process which makes the mitochondria, where that takes place, a larger, fractal-wise, a larger level up EMF device that then powers the cell, that becomes an electromagnetic frequency device, that then powers your heart or brain that is very electromagnetic and powers you, which is how you yourself become like an electromagnetic frequency device, so to speak, yourself. So this is the fractal nature of mitochondrial expression within your body, which is why brains and hearts are very electromagnetic, meaning they deal in light, and that's why the mitochondria within them express this electric light, which is why if there's certain things that you can test with the brain with electricity and shock a heart to get it to go turn back on. That's shocking the mitochondria. It's also why water is so important in terms of those two aspects for conductivity. So that's where a lot of neurological inflammation, which I would say is neurological glitches as a result of time being off, because time essentially within the body, within the brain, and within the heart, is I would call circadian biology, is expressed through light frequencies. So light enters the eye into the brain. The brain is made of what? Tons of mitochondria that are interacting with light, so that the outer light is interacting with the inner light expressed from the electrons within the mitochondria. Okay? So I know now we're talking about inner light communicating with outer light, where in your brain and your heart, that basically allows for those organs to function optimally, that allow for the rest of you to function optimally. Now this is kind of the story of mitochondria in terms of being little light converters. This is the path that light walks. This is the thing within the cell. Now the interesting thing about mitochondria is that historically the cell engulfed mitochondria as its power source. So mitochondria are unique in the sense that they're not quite us, and yet they are. Because in our distant past, at some point, they became part of us, being the cell engulfed us. Mitochondria were like a bacteria. Probiotics, if you hear probiotics express light. Mitochondria acted like a probiotic that expressed light that the cell engulfed in order to harness its light for power, to power that cell, and then the cellular evolution allowed for that to take place to create us as mobile frequency devices, as opposed to hardwire frequency devices, which would be plants that are wired into the earth and the sky. And we're mobile, so we're more complex with what I call our biotech, and our biotech is powered by mitochondria. So basically, you get your mitochondria from your mother, not your father. So a lot of people feel a deep connection to their mother, and mothers feel a deep connection to their child. They think it's because they grew in the mother. I'm sure that's a factor. But also, your mitochondria, which, if you understand that I'm calling them little EMF devices, they interact with frequency, meaning they're essentially little antennas that are receivers and transmitters, both receivers and transmitters, that are receiving and transmitting interactions with your mother. So this is very, very interesting to me. I've never met a biological relative, so I haven't experienced this myself, but when people tell me about it and what it feels like, they don't describe it with their senses, because your senses are on this level. Your ears, your nose, your five senses are here. Your mitochondria are in here. Okay? So basically, your sixth sense, or what you would call your intuitive nature, or your inner knowing, or any of the other phrases that would be subsensory, are actually the antenna reception from your mitochondria. This is where we get a lot of intuition. So when we hear people talking about trusting your higher knowing, that would be trusting your mitochondrial antennas. Let your heart guide you would be a statement about your mitochondrial antennas within your heart, which are the two most, that's why your heart and mind are commonly referenced in all kinds of historical this is also what was traditionally referred to in many spiritual traditions, because it dealt in light. So these light antennas and light converters, being mitochondria, pick up signals and send out signals that interact with their environment and with people around them. They're also affected by magnetic fields. This is a whole deep level of what really makes us at our core. So the things that you know that you cannot explain with your cognitive mind, but are your inner knowings that kind of everyone has, but no one knows quite how to explain, is a story of your mitochondrial function. And that's why people who have very, very good mitochondrial function have high charge. High charge people contain lots of light. Essentially, their redox potential, which is the amount of electrons that they contain, is higher. So this is how different people maintain various levels of health. As you age, your mitochondrial function declines. The amount of electrons that you contain declines. This is what aging is. Your redox potential, meaning the amount of electrons, aka light, that you retain at any given time, goes down. With it, your ability to repair, regenerate, and all the other functions decline with it. Right now, I'll touch just briefly on something called NAD, because it's kind of a peeve of mine, where NAD is also becoming an extremely popular mitochondrial supplement on the market. And I've talked to some pretty high-level guys about mitochondria, and the first thing they mention is NAD. NAD is a shuttle for electrons within the electron chain transfer process inside mitochondria. Everyone is pushing NAD as the solution to mitochondrial health, when NAD is a shuttle, and it's a shuttle within one process of a chain. So I point this out because this will be online, and it's important there's so many alternative health practitioners pushing NAD as the solution to mitochondrial decline and longevity. So it's important that I mention this, because in the future, mitochondria is getting popular, so is NAD. NAD is being marketed as the solution to mitochondrial health, and I'm saying it's just one link in a chain of events, and just increasing the size of the shuttle does not increase the number of passengers. So this is an important point. I more say it for the internet than for you guys, but the internet needs to know that NAD, being a shuttle for electrons, does not increase the amount of electrons that are shuttled by it, which is why it is not necessary. Your body will create the shuttle based on the amount of passengers, electrons, that it needs. So if you came here today and you live 2 blocks away and I give you a 747 to get home, it's a huge, extremely complex shuttle that is unnecessary and gets in the way and would prevent you from getting home quickly. Another example would be me saying, if I had a chain here and I strung it out and I made one link of that chain artificially huge, would that help the function of the chain or hurt it? Well, it would hurt it. It would actually weaken the links on either side of it. So artificially increasing this is the chemical misunderstanding of mitochondria. So that's why I'm trying to get you guys to see When we talk about mitochondria, we're talking about electromagnetic conversion or light conversion from one state to another. That's why, as referred to as the engines of the cell, like your engine takes gasoline and converts it into another form of energy. So your mitochondria are taking electrons and converting them into another form of energy. That conversion process is the process I'm referring to. So it's how the electromagnetics of your body work. That's kind of why mitochondria and the focus of the blog that I wrote today about mitochondrial health in terms of understanding what mitochondria do, like most things, ends up with me talking about tech and Wi-Fi, because now that you understand that mitochondria deal in electromagnetic frequencies, non-native or unnatural electromagnetic frequencies interfere with your mitochondrial function. This is why technology is such an issue for our health. This is why technology affects us on a subsensory level, which is difficult to measure, and we feel off when we're exposed to these frequencies, but at the same time we can't quite put our finger on what's off, because it's subsensory, it's at the deep level of health. So this is why our technology situation is so negative to health. Picking up the vocals okay with all our rain here? Okay, I'm trying to catch this. So
You might be able to hear this better on the internet afterwards.
nice.
Maybe you can speak up.
So basically, this is the story of how mitochondria work inside our bodies, inside our cells, and why people who, as they're aging or interacting with their environment, need to take mitochondria into account. Now, there are ways to boost your mitochondrial function. One that's getting popular is cold. Cold increases mitochondrial function because it condenses the electron chain process within the mitochondria so that you get higher energy output, because light can make more trips in a shorter space, which is why historically people that were in cold environments had to rely on mitochondrial light more because they had less environmental light. So they had to do things to boost their mitochondria. So that's why they were cold and they embraced cold. That's why like now people doing ice baths and different things like that, that boosts mitochondria, because mitochondria, within mitochondria, light can make more trips, so it can make more energy, and then the more energy increases cellular function and everything from there. So that's one way to boost mitochondria. Another way that people boost mitochondria is eating lots of chocolate. So historically, chocolate, and I don't mean Hershey's chocolate like with the sugar and the milk and everything, but cacao, which is what chocolate is derived from, contains a substance called PQQ. PQQ is very, very high in cacao, and it causes mitochondrial genesis, which means you get more mitochondria from consuming it. So that's why the energy that you get from chocolate isn't necessarily it increases your ability to create mitochondria for increased electromagnetic energy, which is why cacao comes from South America typically, in an environment that's very high in unidirectional magnetism and very high in light, which is why the increase of PQQ causing more mitochondria in that location would call it a food of the gods for the Aztecs. Here it helps us. It is not the same effects because it's a different environment, but it's still good for us. Other things you can do to boost mitochondria would be eat lots of seafood and fish, because DHA interacts with light. Light, as we've explained, interacts with your electrons. So the more light you take in with the use of DHA, the more that process interacts, the more benefit you're going to get from your mitochondria. So I'm just trying to give you some practical takeaways. Now, if your light environment the outside of you is really, really high, you don't have to rely on the light environment within you as much, meaning mitochondrial function can decline if you're in a higher light environment, which is why if you go down to the equator, You get more charge from the light you take in from your skin and your eye. You don't have to do as much to promote your inner light from your mitochondria, if that makes sense. Further north you go, more you got to rely on your inner light from your mitochondrial function than from your outer light, because there's less sunlight in colder environments. So that's how that process works. So depending on where you are, you may need different things. Now, if you're all indoors, then you all need to do more things that are going to interact with mitochondrial health, if that makes sense. So now we kind of know what mitochondria are, we kind of know where they are, and you can increase the number of mitochondria that you have. So that's why in anti-aging, the more number of mitochondria you contain and the better they function in terms of the process of light conversion, then the better your health is going to be, the more your charge will be. As you age, your body shifts its focus from energy on the outer fringes of your body, being your arms and legs, and focuses it more on your heart and brain. Okay, so this is very important, because when we talk about our growth phase versus our longevity phase, mitochondrial focus shifts over time. If you want to live a long life, know that your body is trying to make your arms and legs smaller to make your heart and brain stronger. So this is why, like, when you're young, you can have big, strong arms and big, strong legs and big muscles in your growth phase. Yet in your longevity phase, people that have huge muscles, often artificially created in a longevity phase, sacrifice their longevity for that aesthetic benefit, because we confuse how our mitochondria function and where they're most centralized. They're most centralized in the brain and the heart, because those are the two most important parts of you. You can cut out and lose a whole lot of other pieces. All your arms and legs can go. It's okay. The tiger can bite your arm off and you can still be okay. So that's why what happens when you go into fight or flight and you run away from the tiger, historically in evolution, your body pulls things in, centralizes it in. Well, what it's doing is it's pulling the energy from the different levels into your mitochondria, where they are, your brain and your heart. Your heart has to pump circulation fast to the brain to keep it running so that you're most alert during that process. Remember, heart and brain are always mitochondrial. They're just containers for mitochondria, which is why they're so electromagnetic. So anytime people talk about, like, fish oil, for example, having a benefit for the heart and brain, I know that it interacts with light and mitochondria convert light, and that's why it helps the heart and the brain. So we're just going a level deeper when we talk about these different things, if that makes sense. So just to review, mitochondria inside the cell convert light to chemical energy, create water in the process, emit a frequency called light, some that's visible, some that's not. So that's how light, your little mitochondria are the little EMF antennas inside your body. That's what they do. That's where they reside. And the better you treat your mitochondria, the better your health will be, especially in the longevity phase of life, when the arms and legs can go away. I talked to someone the other day that had joint pain, which is super, super common. And I tried to explain to him that in my mind, the joint pain was a low charge issue because his body is pulling his energy into his core, where his heart and brain are, because he needs charge for those, and taking it away from repairing the fringes, the far out branches of his body, which is why so many people tend to have joint pain, because the body is willing to sacrifice the joints for the sake of the heart and the brain. So it's important that story means he needs to boost his charge, mitochondrially speaking, meaning make his mitochondria work better so that he can take care of his heart and brain and create enough electromagnetic margin to repair his joints. He did not have a deficiency in any chemical or any things. Taking in more of the things in his diet would have no repair mechanism in his joints. His real issue was a low charge issue, And I told him to change the lights in his office to remove joint pain, which is because artificial light creates wrong information that interacts poorly with the mitochondria that interact with light because they're light converters, distorts the information, causes them to not work so well, causes you to not heal so well, causes you to have joint pain or any number of other issues. So most people don't think joint pain equals I have a mitochondrial issue. But now you can trace it back, because if you've got a pain here, I'm going to say maybe you've got a pain here that's caused by a problem here. And this is the mitochondria, which is where we need to start with everything, which is where charge is inside here. The electron, light, is inside here. So that's why the more light you fit in this guy, called your mitochondria, the better your cells are going to work and repair. The better your cells work and repair, the better your organs function. The better your organs function, the better you function. But the important takeaway is that a lot of stuff that's being promoted for mitochondrial health, being the chemical shuttles for electrons in the mitochondria. Another one is CoQ10. If you take it, you won't make it. So you can understand, like, these are the things people are telling for mitochondrial health. Really, it's a charge issue. Charge would be to be in nature, in nature's environment, in natural light, getting lots and lots of electrons. Which is why, dietarily speaking, eating lots of fish and red meat in the modern age, when we're shedding electrons very, very quickly, because of the tech environment that we're in, need to consume more of these things. So that's a story about the dietary aspects of mitochondria, because of mitochondria deal in electron chain transfer, and magnesium is much lower in electrons than iron is. Which is why in modern society we need to consume probably more iron than magnesium. Plants have magnesium, they have green blood because they're mobile or non-mobile devices, so they don't have to be as complex. So their blood doesn't contain stuff that interacts with light mobily like ours does. Now this is a dietary tell about mitochondrial health. So that's why a lot of people, if you're vegan, you can do it down at the equator because you get massive amounts of light from the environment, so you don't have to eat as much light in the form of electrons. Further north you go, more electrons you got to eat because you're not absorbing them from the light in your environment. So the whole story of light is always a story of electrons, which is always a story of mitochondria that convert that light into you. Because essentially you are made of all these things, of the light being converted. So you've heard some people will say, oh, we're all made of light, we're all made of stardust, so to speak. And the process that light takes to convert itself into you chemically comes from the mitochondria, which is why historically the cell engulfed that bacteria as a power source. It's our good friend, comes from your mother. It's why mom is so great. We just had Mother's Day. You have a unique connection with your mother. And also different neurological issues and different cardiac issues, these are the killers in modern society, right? Are heart attacks and strokes. Those are mitochondrial issues. So it's important that we look at disease. If the primary diseases are heart and brain, and I'm telling you the heart and brain are just containers for mitochondria, and mitochondria are containers for electromagnetics, that's what we better be talking about in terms of health. And you better believe that the electromagnetics in our environment affect the electromagnetics in our bodies. So this is all this information's detailed in the blog I just posted, and also on the site I talk about it, you know what I mean? But this is, as you start to hear about mitochondria, focus on the light, not the chemistry. Because most people, and I've talked to pretty high level people with mitochondrial that are talking about mitochondria, and they're just so fixated on the shuttle and not the passenger. And the passenger is the electron. And electrons are difficult because they're not measurable in the way, because they emit frequency that is not fixed. In the same way the sun emits a frequency, sunlight, is different at different times You can't say sunlight is sunlight is sunlight, so it's hard to measure. Sunlight in the morning affects you different than sunlight at night. Quanta emitted from the electron is different at different times. It can be calibrated differently. The calibration of the quanta of the electron is intention applied to programmable water. That's how that process works. It's why water is more programmable than a dense substance like maybe the wood in this chair. It is the quantum membrane between electromagnetics and subatomic particles and material stuff.